who voted in Colorado in the midterms last week said yes to a plan that would make it legal for people 21 and older to use psychedelic mushrooms. But Colorado isn't the first state in the nation to legalize magic mushrooms, and it is gaining traction across the United States as multiple states, both conservative and liberal, are investing in research on its medicinal use. When I first started researching this, I was dead set against it. But after my research, I do think it could be useful in certain situations. Stick around until the end, get the whole story, and let me know what you think. I had no idea, but Colorado is actually the second state to legalize shroom use after Oregon. The recent Colorado vote establishes a not-so-regulated system for substances like psilocybin and psilocin, which are the hallucinogens found in some mushrooms, also known as magic mushrooms. So let's talk about Oregon first. The voters in Oregon passed the measure in 2020, but it is vastly different from what was passed in Colorado. In Oregon, ballot measure 109 allows for the manufacture and controlled therapeutic use of psilocybin. The measure requires the Oregon Health Authority to allow licensed regulated production and possession of psilocybin, exclusively for administration by licensed facilitators to clients. So it's legal for medicinal use only. Also, Oregon allows counties to decide whether or not they want to participate in the program. And this month, 25 of 36 counties in Oregon voted against participating. Shroom use will become legal there in the beginning of 2023, so just a couple more months. However, in Colorado's ballot initiative would allow those 21 and older to grow, possess, and share the psychedelic substances, but not sell them for personal use. People who want to use the mushrooms would not need approval from a doctor. In addition to being able to grow and use their own magic mushrooms, those who want to try the therapy could do so through the newly formed healing centers, which would be allowed to supply clients with mushrooms but not sell them. Instead, clients would pay for the services of the facilitator at the center. In Colorado, counties and municipalities would be able to control how healing centers operate, but they would not be able to get rid of them altogether. The initiative will allow people to use plant-based psychedelic drugs in 2024, and an advisory board would be able to add more drugs to the program in 2026. Supporters of the movement in Colorado argue that the state's plan for mental health is not working, and that they should instead use natural psychedelics, which have been used for hundreds of years to treat depression, PTSD, anxiety, addiction, and other conditions. They claim this will help people instead of just taking a bunch of medicine all the time for the rest of their lives that doesn't really solve the problem. The group that promoted the measure, Natural Medicine Colorado, calls this passage a truly historical moment. Proponents have repeatedly stressed that the measure does not allow for dispensaries like those selling recreation and medical marijuana. But if you are allowed to grow, possess, and share, or just go to a healing center to get the drug with no medical reason, do you really need dispensaries? There is some truth in their claims. The earliest concrete evidence of shroom use consists of rock-etched murals depicting mushroom symbols found in northern Australia, where archaeologists and geologists suggest that the illustrations date back to 10,000 BC. While there is no hard evidence supporting earlier use, it's logical to assume humans have consumed psychoactive fungi since the beginning of the human race. Magic mushrooms were popularized in the US in 1957 when a photo essay featuring an American banker and mushroom enthusiast R. Gordon Wasson was published in Life magazine. A few years earlier, Wasson had stumbled across an indigenous tribe using psychoactive mushrooms in Mexico after hearing about their use in the southern region. In 1939, an article was published by Harvard University about the medicinal use of the fungi by doctors in Mexico. The effects of psychedelics as medicine was already going on worldwide. In Switzerland in the 1940s, Albert Hofmann accidentally discovered LSD. His work led to the development of LSD as a treatment for mental illness. Around the same time, after visiting Hoffman at Sandoz Pharmaceuticals, British psychologist Ronald Sanderson began using psychedelics to treat patients with psychiatric disorders. After discovering the mushrooms, Watson sent samples to Hoffman, who isolated psilocybin and developed a synthesis for the drug in his lab at Sandoz Pharmaceuticals, which then started producing 2 milligram pills to be distributed for research purposes. For the next 2 decades, scientists studied the use of psychedelics in clinical experiments to be promising treatments as an aid to therapy for a broad range of psychiatric diagnoses, including alcoholism, schizophrenia, autism spectrum disorders, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and depression. However, with the widespread use of LSD in the 1960s, the UN classified most psychedelics, including LSD and psilocybin, as Schedule I drugs at the 1967 United States Convention on Drugs, even though there was very little evidence of harm. Schedule I drugs are defined as having no accepted medical use and significant potential for harm and dependence. So despite this schedule clearly being quite unscientific for these drugs, they have remained there ever since. In the early 1970s, President Nixon followed suit by making these Schedule I drugs in the US. So that's the history. Back to today in Colorado. Some people are worried because the drugs have not been approved by the Food and Drug Administration as medicine. They also argue that if the drugs are allowed to be used in healing centers without doctor approval or oversight, and if people are allowed to use them privately, it will not be safe to the public. People might think that using these substances is a good idea and safe, but it could be really dangerous. And there is also a lot of truth in this. And I am personally very happy to not be raising my kids where psychedelics are legal. First off, people in other states of consciousness can be very dangerous to the public. I remember when I was in college, there was this guy on campus tripping, and he literally took off his shoes and threw them at the police. Obviously, he was arrested. Secondly, allowing the private, unsupervised use of psychedelics is super dangerous, as they will likely be available to be shared with our kids. They can increase blood pressure, heart rate, and body temperature, induce vomiting, cause tremors, numbness, weakness, and uncoordinated movements. Plus, it is super dangerous to be wandering around the streets in a state of basically unconsciousness. You will not be aware of the dangers that surround you. There is also another major scary issue. People diagnosed with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or who have a family history of psychosis are always screened out of clinical trials. If you have a vulnerability to psychosis, it could be that exposing you to a psychedelic could unmask that psychosis or it could lead to a psychotic event. Critics of the ballot say the same deep-pocketed players who have pushed for legalizing recreational marijuana in various states are using a similar playbook to create a commercial market and eventually recreational dispensaries for dangerous substances. Even so, the FDA has designated psilocybin a breakthrough therapy to treat major depressive disorder. The designation can expedite research, development, and review of a drug if it might offer substantial improvements over existing treatments. The FDA could potentially approve the drug as early as 2025. So this is actually not a new movement. Oregon and Colorado are so far the only states to legalize the therapeutic use of psilocybin. But studying them for therapy has made inroads not only in blue states like Hawaii, Connecticut, and Maryland, but also GOP-led states like Texas, Utah, and Oklahoma. Crazily enough, Texas has yet to legalize medical marijuana, but former Republican Governor Rick Perry helped push through a bill to use $1.4 million to fund a study of psilocybin for treating PTSD, which I think is pretty radical in comparison. A significant group that is pushing the legalization of the psychedelic drug is our veterans, and this is what has led to the conservative states investing in studying the drug. Let's take the conservative state of Utah, for instance. Matthew Butler, a Utah native who recently retired after spending 27 years in the Army, is among the veterans who are encouraging to research and legalize the drug for medical use. The recently retired Green Beret had already tried antidepressants therapy and a support dog, but his arrest for punching a hole in his father's wall after his family tried to stage an intervention in Utah made it clear none of that was working. He had a nice house and a great job, but was unable to sleep sleep due to frequent nightmares. He also describes his life as a wreck due to crippling anxiety and the need to avoid crowds. He eventually found psychedelic drugs, and he says they changed his life. I was able to step back and understand what was happening, said Butler. Now he is 52 years old, married, and he gets along with his parents. He doesn't have problems with the police anymore. So what happened to Mr. Butler to get him there? The 2018 arrest was a turning point for Butler. He started looking for new ways to deal with the PTSD he has suffered since deploying 6 times to Iraq and Afghanistan, and working in counterterrorism and hostage rescues in Somalia for the U.S. Special Forces before retiring as a lieutenant colonel in 2017. He found ayahuasca while he was looking for something to help him. Ayahuasca is a part of traditional cultures in South America. Last summer, he took part in a ceremony involving the psychoactive brew. A woman who knew about ayahuasca oversaw the ceremony. The woman talked to him as the experience took hold. He felt euphoria and saw geometric shapes. He felt like he was entering his subconscious. She talked to him about his childhood and how the military has shaped his life. He credits that single session with getting his PTSD about 80% under control, though he occasionally does another if he finds the symptoms returning. There are other people speaking out, veterans and terminally ill cancer patients, who claim this therapy have really helped them. So what if we could give people who are depressed or suffer from PTSD or anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder a medication, and they could wake up the next day and be fine without any side effects? That would be very transformative. So what do y'all think? Are you for it? Are you against it? Let me know in the comment section down below. My name is Jessica, and if random news and current events are your thing, then I'm your girl. Like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. Thanks for watching. Bye!